I didn't hear anything about it until they were voting on it at City Council, where I finally got notice of a vote on this. Showed up at City Council, and of course, the whole City Council, except for Donna Fry at that point, everybody but Donna Fry rubber stamped the plan. And as of about June of 2005, Grantville is a redevelopment project area. Immediately, the County of San Diego sued the city to invalidate that designation of Grantville as a redevelopment project area. And the county contended that Grantville is not blighted and therefore should not be redeveloped. And everybody suspected the real issue was property tax. And for 3 years, the city and the county negotiated a settlement for that lawsuit. In July of 2008, they settled their lawsuit, and they settled by Grantville project area agreeing to pay the county a total of $49 million. And $10 million of that actually was set aside for affordable housing, which both the city or the project area and the county would claim as their affordable housing credits. We didn't litigate that. We don't know if that's legal or not, but probably not. And about $8 million of that 49 was devoted to what they called at the time joint use projects between the city and the county. They'd really be projects of the county's choosing, and nobody knows what those projects are. They weren't defined at all. We think that's probably illegal. And then, of course, I think everybody knows about the plan to transfer over $31 million of Grantville tax increment out of the project area to improve the Blue Line trolley on C Street, wherein at the same time, and that's within CCDC, at the same time CCDC pays the county same exact amount, same exact installments, over $31 million to build a park at the county administration building. And this is despite the fact that in redevelopment law, it says you can't take tax increment money to improve a county administration building. So therein is the crux of our lawsuit. We sued the county, the city, and the redevelopment agency, saying that that whole scheme is illegal, and it's not legal to take money out of the project area, it's not legal to funnel it through downtown and have it end up at the county administration building, and furthermore, it's not legal for them to negotiate a settlement, a monetary settlement, a validation lawsuit that way. So our lawsuit was in process for over 2 years. It was heard at the end of last year, and in the end, we lost on all counts. So the Judge Joe Lewis, ruled that the money transfer to the trolley line technically was legal. The money transfer from CCDC to the county administration building technically was legal. And therefore, that whole money funneling scheme was legal. And with regards to the joint use projects, which were never defined, she suggested, well, she may have ruled on that, in our favor on that one, but we failed to exhaust administrative remedy, and that means we did not raise the issue sufficiently in front of the city council to change their minds. And that kind of ignores the fact that we did argue this in front of the county at a later date, and the county had to authorize the settlement. Our attorney wrote a letter specifically on that issue to the County Board of Supervisors. Well, the Board of Supervisors still voted in favor of that settlement agreement. So in the end, what we're seeing here with redevelopment law is essentially it is so fouled up that that type of money funneling arrangement is deemed legal. And that's among the reasons I think that it's time to abolish this whole system and start over with something new. And in the end, Brown's plan really doesn't go far enough because it leaves redevelopment law intact. Essentially, once the county or once the state gets out of the redevelopment business, they hand the state's redevelopment law over to the local authorities. So they would hand it over to the city to still do redevelopment. And with that, the city will still have the right to use eminent domain to take properties and still the blight definitions and all of that. Well, I think the whole process needs to stop. They need to come up with something better, more fair, and start off fresh. Now, having gone through that abuse, I'd kind of like to go over some other abuses, which perhaps you haven't heard about so much, but we get to hear about because we're involved in this. People are coming to us from other areas to tell us their stories of abuse, and people are sending me stories from throughout the state on state abuses elsewhere, redevelopment abuses throughout the state. Now, one of these abuses is Sue Finch and her family. She came to me real early on in this battle. Their family had a successful Midas dealership in downtown. Their property, their business was taken by eminent domain. To hear her tell it, they really didn't get anything out of this business. And what we know, when they take properties by eminent domain, they're supposed to give you free market value. Well, evidently that does not include goodwill. That's something they can't put a monetary value on, evidently. And so if you have a business that's service-oriented, say like a Midas dealership, you end up getting the shaft because they're going to just value your business based on whatever equipment you have, whatever product you may have on site, and that's that. Now, the irony in this situation is evidently they wanted that Midas business to move out of downtown because they wanted to, in its place, have a Borders bookstore. Well, as you know, Borders filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks ago, and that's a store they're closing down. So they moved out a successful business, and this, probably in the 90s at some point, moved out a successful business, replaced it with the business of their choosing, and now that business is gone. So that's an abuse of redevelopment. Now, another one is, heard about this one more recently, and this is from a guy named Miles Goodman, who owned a very successful retail business downtown on Broadway, actually at 2 locations, which, as I recall, were across the street from each other. And so they fronted Broadway, streets were Union or First, one of those streets, and the business was called the 7 C's, and they sold products that would cater to people in the military, so then clothing, other things young guys would want to buy. And a very successful business, had, I don't remember exactly how many square feet of retail, but it may have been like 30,000 square feet. It was large. And at some point during this history of this business, CCDC comes in. They don't want his businesses there anymore. They now own the buildings his businesses are in. They jack up his rent. They tell him he needs to leave. But they'll give him relocation assistance. Well, they relocated him down to like 12th and Market, someplace like that, much smaller shop, like 8,000 square feet, if I recall the number correct, and about $10,000 more rent per month. Well, he went out of business. So, you don't hear about that, but that's what happens. That's their relocation assistance. They'll relocate you right to the place where you don't do business anymore. Brian,
10 minutes down, 5 to go.
Okay. Well, let me finish up then with this, let's see, a quicker story. This goes back to, this is actually maybe a redevelopment success story at this point. Last year, heard from a fellow named Philip, lives in Martinez, California. Martinez is a little city on the bay up in San Francisco, and Martinez wanted to turn their whole town into a redevelopment project area. They didn't even have a redevelopment agency. They wanted to establish a redevelopment agency. Philip was among the group fighting this. Philip, in fact, put his name on the ballot to run for mayor to defeat this thing. Well, he didn't win as mayor, but what happened ultimately was Martinez, with Brown's proposal to abolish redevelopment, they dropped their idea for their redevelopment agency, and which is a good thing, because the downtown they wanted to redevelop was full of historic buildings, and essentially all they wanted was the tax increment out of that. So, to, I guess, sum up, And we need to stop this process, partly because of those abuses, but also keep in mind that redevelopment in San Diego, the city, is paying $50 million a year to subsidize this redevelopment process. Mayor Sanders just got his $4 billion wish list, rubber stamped by the city council, well, mostly rubber stamped, 2 no votes, thanks, we thank them for their no votes, Sherry Leitner and David Alvarez. But that $4 billion now represents $890 million of property tax money the city's general fund will never see. And this city's not hurting for buildings, it's hurting for services, and you can't use redevelopment money to pay for services. So that $890 million, if this goes through, that's gone. It's not paying for fire or police. I'll turn this over to Fred Schnellbelt, former city councilman, current president of Citizens for Private Property Rights, and a renowned realtor.
Commercial real estate broker. Thank you, Brian. Actually, when Brian called me a couple weeks ago, he said, how would you like to do a debate on affordable housing? I'll just stay from over here. I have all this stuff here, it'll be easier. He said, how would you like to be in a debate on affordable housing? And I said, well, no, not really. He said, why don't you get Assemblyman Norby? He's kind of the leader in California on this. And he says, I tried, but he wasn't available. And I said, well, there must be somebody else. And he says, no, Fred. He said, I've tried everybody. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel with you. Now you can imagine when I walked in, my surprise, one of the ladies thought she knew me, and she says, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm going to debate on affordable housing, I think. She says, are you nervous? I said, no, I've done this before. She said, why are you in the ladies' room? So sometimes you do get nervous and you don't even know it. Now, I think to really understand, and I'm glad to see that people interested in affordable housing are kind of joining the fight since I've been doing this for over 30 years. But you have to understand a little bit of the history of how housing became unaffordable in San Diego. So I'm one of those people that have nothing else to do in life but collect newspaper articles. I know you can't see these from the distance, but this is the LA Times 1969. And it says, shortage of housing strangling San Diego. Little relief in sight. Sort of what's new. But then they turn the developers loose, and it comes out here in 1972. County headed for overbuilt housing market. Then the Sierra Club put out a petition to stop the growth and the development and wanted to stop housing, 1973. So the Sierra Club got 28,000 people to sign a petition. We don't want any more housing built. Of course, if you don't build housing, you get higher prices.
They didn't want to stop housing, they wanted to slow it down as a part of that.
Okay, they wanted to slow it down, and some of them wanted to stop it, and some people say, I don't want to see one more house in San Diego the rest of my life built. So then you have the mayor and the politicians following up on this. This one says, city acts to impose tough new construction curves. Well, that's going to slow things down. Mayor Wilson says, get tough approach needed. This is moving us up to 1974. Roger Hedgecock becomes mayor, and he has an editorial. Should the city limit its growth? Yes. Well, when you limit housing, you raise the prices. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is, up till 1972, 1973, the average medium price home in San Diego was less than the national average. Then when all of these ideas got implemented, managed growth, slow growth, the tiers of Freilich, and all these things about how we're going to stop construction from taking place, the prices started going up. So after 1973, every single year, the price in San Diego went higher than the national median till now. It's 3 times the price.
Fred, the initial 15 minutes for the position on regarding abolishing redevelopment is up. Do you want to make a concluding comment, and you can jump back in later?
Well, I think you all understand that when you restrict the supply of something, the prices go up. And we've seen the restriction of the supply of housing, the prices have gone up, so they're 3 times higher, and that's what makes it unaffordable. And the Affordable Housing Coalition is just making it worse by the policies that they're trying to get adopted.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to want to talk to you.
You can even ask questions.
A couple of housekeeping things. There is coffee and pastries, cookies in the back. Anytime, please help yourself. I believe the restrooms are just out this door and back this way.
Yeah, that's where I was. Ladies on the right.
I'm sorry, I took a light on the ladies.
Remember, men is a 3-letter word.
I saw it at the Inn of Women.
On the reform redevelopment side tonight, the Affordable Housing Coalition has asked Brian Truxier, who was the interim CEO at the Southeastern Economic Development Corporation. And earlier, I stated for the record that I was a member, and am a member of that board. And so you know that I have a particular bias in this matter, in addition to being an advocate for affordable housing. Brian comes from the private sector. I don't think he had worked in public sector before the position at SEDC.
No, most certainly not.
And he may never work in the public sector again.
There's an excellent chance of that.
But I would like to present Brian Truxier.
Thank you for asking me to step into the lion's den. I know how Daniel felt, but truthfully, I don't think that my position on redevelopment and the need for reform is terribly different. Brian made a lot of excellent cases for why redevelopment needs reform. When redevelopment was originally adopted in the state of California, what was envisioned was a tool that would allow neighborhoods where there had been serious disinvestment in the community to have an opportunity to incentivize private developers to come back to areas where they would not otherwise find a reason to develop. And had it been limited to that, and had it not become partly a political tool and partly an economic tool that was abused, I don't think most of us would be against redevelopment. I don't think anybody fundamentally believes that people who live in areas where there's missing city infrastructure like sidewalks and gutters and storm sewers, where the median income is less than half of the rest of the city, shouldn't see some opportunity for improvement in their communities. And that was what redevelopment was originally intended to do. And when I say reform redevelopment, my position is based on the fact that the law as it's currently written has too many loopholes. And as it's been interpreted, it's got even more loopholes. What needs to happen is we need to reform the law to make it much more specific and responsive to the needs of the people that it was targeted at serving. It was not targeted at serving large private developers building stadiums. That was not contemplated. That, in my opinion, and I think you've seen my comments, I don't think that's appropriate. That's not where redevelopment dollars go. Now, can they make an argument that the construction of Petco Park helped bring economic activity downtown to San Diego? I don't know. It certainly looks like that on game days when there's a lot of people that otherwise might not be there. But I don't know that you could actually do an analysis and find out that the sales tax revenue at anybody's store is going up significantly. I don't know if you'd see that the people who are down there for the game frequent the restaurants regularly. Certainly didn't help Borders stay open. So as far as acknowledging that there have been abuses, no question. The question is, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater? We say we want to abolish it and start over. But by abolishing it and handing the money to the state, you're taking local money and you're trusting the people in Sacramento to do something wise with it. I think that's a tremendous mistake for people in the local communities. The state budget problems are much worse than any of the cities in California, except perhaps Vallejo, which filed bankruptcy and found out that the reason they filed didn't work in the first place. But the bottom line is, I don't want to trust the people in Sacramento to decide how to best help the communities that are in desperate need in the city of San Diego. That needs to be something that's determined locally, and those dollars need to be controlled locally. Now, do we need to reform it so that it's administered fairly and it accomplishes the purposes that it was designed when it was originally adopted? No question. A lot of people don't understand how redevelopment really works. There's this discussion about tax increment, and I think a lot of people miss the point. you're in a neighborhood and that neighborhood is in decline. People are moving out, properties are falling into disrepair, businesses are shutting, the schools are leaving and closing. And at that point in time, real estate taxes are actually going down. Nobody's getting anything out of that neighborhood at that time. The tool of redevelopment was designed to come in and say, first of all, let's make a determination if redevelopment is necessary to stimulate a regeneration in this neighborhood. Let's make the case for blight, and I hate that word. I can't imagine anything worse than if you live in a neighborhood where people come up and knock on your door and say, your neighborhood is blighted. There's got to be a better word that we could come up with. That's just an offensive term on its face. But let's say that we're talking about a neighborhood that's obviously been in decline. Well, at the time that redevelopment project area is adopted, all of the taxes that are currently being collected at that date continue to go to the people who are already receiving them. The schools, the city, the county, and the state, and all the various taxing agencies. That money never goes anywhere else. What happens is that the project area then borrows money. They borrow that money and they use it to incentivize development, whether it's affordable housing, retail establishments in areas where there's missing retail because stores have closed. It really doesn't make any difference, but what happens is suddenly there's a little buzz in the neighborhood. There's some new sidewalks. There's a business opening up in an empty building. Property values start creeping up. In order to be able to collect that incremental increase in tax value, you have to have debt. The state said, you know, you can't just create it unless you have obligated that money to repay for the cost of those improvements. So you borrow the money first, and then you create the stream of income that will pay back that debt. And that's called the tax increment. Well, 100% of the tax increment above that original base year doesn't go to redevelopment. There are tax sharing agreements with the original taxation authorities, the school districts, the county, all the different taxing agencies that already were getting some of the original money while the property values were dropping, participate and get a piece of the increased value. Keep in mind, they aren't investing any money for the turnaround. In fact, many of those groups, and I was highly offended on Monday at City Council to listen to the San Diego Unified School District show up and hold their hands out and ask for redevelopment money when they closed schools in many of the neighborhoods that the city's redevelopment program turned around. They didn't invest any dollars in the turnaround, but once the turnaround happened, they wanted the money. For doing what? For closing schools and busing kids across town? That's what happened in those neighborhoods. So when the neighborhoods turned around, now they come sidling back up. Okay, we want a piece of the action because we did what? We didn't do anything. We just stood there and watched the decline. And now that you've turned it around and there's tax revenue generated, we want a piece of the action. That is offensive to me. And I know that may offend a number of people. I believe in education. I teach. My parents were both teachers. I know how important it is to have a good public education, but it's got to be done the right way. You know, there is a fundamental problem in the state of California that nobody wants to talk about. You want to reform something? Talk about Prop 13. Prop 13 passed in 1978, and that's caused a serious problem in the way the state is forced to budget. I know that's a tremendously unpopular topic with many groups, but the fact of the matter is, real estate taxes go up at 2%, expenses go up at more than that, that creates a funding gap. It's never going to be otherwise. When Arnold Schwarzenegger decided to run for governor, and I'm not sure that was the best idea ever, Warren Buffett sat down with him and said, Arnold, you want to fix the California budget problem? You got to put Prop 13 on the table. Warren Buffett, guy from Nebraska, he doesn't have any vested interest in California. He's a blue-collar guy, he still drives an old car around. He's managed to be pretty shrewd in how he invests his money.
Yeah.
He looks at California and says, I know what's wrong. Arnold's response, don't ever say that out loud again, and if you do, you got to do 500 sit-ups. You know, so even the experts standing on the outside know that there's a fundamental problem with the way that this government is funded. Taking redevelopment away doesn't solve that problem. It actually puts a little drop in a big bucket, and the governor gets to declare that he won something, when in fact the people who lose, most of them are the ones who voted for him and put him in office. Okay, so now we've got tax increment. The real question is, how do we spend it appropriately? And that's where we need to enact some reforms. Without redevelopment tax increment, affordable housing, especially in communities like San Diego, dries up. There's simply not enough incentives for affordable housing given the high cost of land, the high cost of construction, the limited supply of land for future and new development for affordable housing to exist, while at the same time, our wages have not gone up. The median income in this community has not increased like the median home prices. So there's a gap. Tax increment helps fill that gap. It's but one tool. How do you reform it? Well, first of all, you set out to protect affordable housing. I don't care what your politics are, I don't care where you live. Everybody has a right to a good public education and decent housing. I mean, we are supposed to be still the greatest country on the planet. And we better start acting like it by caring for those people who are less fortunate. You can't put your head in the sand and say, I've got mine, I don't really care about anybody else. Had our parents and our grandparents done that, most of us would be speaking a different language right now, because this country might not be standing independent as the country that it is. So what are the reforms? Well, you need to remain active in the communities and the neighborhoods where there's really a disinvestment. You know, there needs to be a measurable standard for determining what that blight is. It needs to be an objective standard that everybody can understand. And once you've established that an area is eligible for redevelopment, you need to remeasure that standard on a regular basis to determine when they've moved things far enough along that they don't need the support of tax increment any longer. The project areas have sunset provisions. My position would be there are some that develop fast enough. They don't need to stay around for 30 years. They could be done in 10 or 15 years. At that point in time, the tax increment support should go away and all the taxes from that area should return to the original taxing authorities.
Amen.
That's not a problem to do it. You can reform the law and set that up. You know, you've got areas though where, let's see.
10 minutes down, 5 to go.
Okay, adopt targeted funding guidelines. Tax increment should be the last money into a project, not the first. Okay, it's supposed to fill the financing gaps for people to come in and develop that otherwise wouldn't be there. But it's not supposed to clear the way for them to come there. Developers are inherently supposed to take risk. You know, that's why sometimes developers make it and sometimes they don't. You need to look at a ratio of private money to public money. There should be an express ratio that says that if the private dollars don't outnumber the public dollars 4 to 1, this project doesn't get approved. That's a real simple standard. Everybody can measure that. There needs to be a way for reporting and auditing completed projects to make sure that they end up delivering what they promised to deliver in terms of jobs, sales tax, and if not, then that public money that went into the project needs to come out of the project. There needs to be a way for the developer to be held accountable if they don't create what they promised to create. That's not that difficult. There needs to be a standard formula for gap financing for affordable housing projects. So that, you know, in Southeastern San Diego, we had $1 million a year to spend on affordable housing projects. The gap financing requests on average in San Diego are $150,000 a unit. That meant in any given year I could fund 6 units. 6. In a community where there's over 100,000 people already living in a need for affordable housing. There's got to be a formula approach. There's got to be a sharing of affordable housing dollars. There needs to be an independent redevelopment agency board. You can't have elected officials in charge of it. They get to set the policy as city council, but the redevelopment agency board needs to be professionals and people who live in the communities where redevelopment's occurring. They need to be controlling how the money gets collected and dispersed. Once elected officials get involved, it becomes a political process, not an economic process, which is what it was designed to do in the first place. It's supposed to be purely an economic tool. It's not a political tool to get people reelected, and it shouldn't be used that way. Downtown San Diego, I don't know how many people remember, but I know that 30 years ago, your parents would tell you, you can't go downtown, it's okay to go to Tijuana. Okay, downtown redevelopment has worked, but I think it's worked as well as it needs to. I don't think it needs any more support. I didn't believe the cap lift made sense. I didn't believe they could prove blight, and there's certainly no standard to it. What blight they might have proved might have been enough for some judge to say, well, there's really no objective standard. So let's give them an objective standard. Let's define what the percentage of missing infrastructure has to be to qualify for blight. We can spell it out. Judges have to guess. Give them a formula to work with. It's not that difficult. To everybody in this room, I'd say stay informed, stay involved, and continue to speak out when things aren't going well. It's your money. It's your community. The people who sit in elected offices at the state level, the federal level, the county level, and the local level are just politicians. They're not anybody special. I check. They all put their pants on the same way I do. One leg at a time. You know? They need to hear you. You need to sit down and explain to them what you want. Well, they don't listen?
No.
I agree. There are times they don't listen because unfortunately we live in a society where as soon as somebody gets elected, the pressure is on to continue to get reelected. 1 minute. You know, my solution to that is to create term limits and give everybody one long term so that they know they're serving one time, and once they're in office, they don't owe anybody anything because they're only going to serve for 6, 8, 10 years and they're done. Stagger the terms, put them in office one time only, and then they can qualify for their pensions. They can get whatever benefits they want for being an elected official, but they can serve without special interest groups gnawing away at them because that's the fear of getting reelected. And that's a reality in their world. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. The hope from this point on is that we would try to have a balance in points of view presented. I don't necessarily need you to declare you want to abolish redevelopment before you speak, but it would be helpful. And if you're on the reform side, it'd be helpful to know that.
There's a whole group of us who believe, I believe as I do, that we have nothing against redevelopment. We want to get rid of eminent domain. Brian is a fluke. He's an honest, decent guy in the business.
Stand up, please, so the folks can hear you.
There's a whole group of us who are not against
Could you introduce yourself?
I'm Bob
Microphone?
Lee. I'm a property owner. I sit on a planning group, but this is my own ideas. There are many of us who are in favor of redevelopment. I could make a killing in redevelopment in Bryant's area. But the problem is the city. The problem is eminent domain. That I spend more time and money protecting myself from eminent domain than I can afford to invest in my property. And I have a whole speech here that will explain it. And then I will gladly sit with my friend Brian, who did a damn good job. In fact, I think he did such a good job that he's fooling himself. He thinks the rest of them are as good as he is on his staff.
Thank you. Yes, Greg.
Yeah, I'm Greg Robinson. I'm vice chair of the Affordable Housing Coalition, but I wear a couple of hats. And the other one is I'm also vice president of the American Federation of Teachers, Local 1931, Teachers Union. And what hasn't been talked about here in this debate? Well, let me just back up and say I started off thinking I was kind of for reform, and I started reading. And I read the legislative analyst's position on this stuff. And I thought, oh my God, maybe I'm for abolishing. And the more I read, I thought, maybe what I'm for is tar and feathers. Because, unfortunately, it seems to me that redevelopment has used affordable housing as a battering ram for private interests. And because I care deeply about that affordable housing. I think there are other ways of providing that same kind of funds. But let me respond to something you said earlier about teachers and about schools here in California. We're talking about scarce resources right now. These are the worst economic times we've faced since the Great Depression. Economists talk about something called opportunity costs. That is the money that's going into redevelopment agencies. And this is a large amount of money. I was astounded when I read the legislative analyst position. It used to be about 2% of all property taxes are going in there. That's now 12% of all property taxes in the state of California are going into redevelopment. That's a lot of money. And it's not going to affordable housing. Most of the development would have happened otherwise. That's the position of the legislative analyst. That's the position of objective academic studies. It may have relocated from one place to another. It may have speeded it up a little bit, but it would have happened otherwise. But now we're faced with this horrible choice. Let's talk about education in the state of California. We have the best public university, not merely in the country, but on earth. And we are seeing an institution that took 200 years to create being destroyed in less than 2 decades. I'm going to your t-shirt there, your shirt there, UC Davis.
Exactly.
The University of California is under assault. And I teach at a community college. Let me just tell you my story. What I've seen happening to our kids. University of California closing its doors, increasing the people, and being told to go to community college. My school alone, Grossmont Community College, in the last 2 years, we've closed down 1,000 classes. Classes that students desperately need to get into so that they can go on and go to UC and become a vet, become a real estate agent or a developer, whatever. We need that money in those schools today. The costs that are going on into redevelopment, that money needs to fund our future. This is a time in which we have to make hard choices. Education is an investment that pays off. Dollar for dollar, we'll get more bang investing in our universities than in redevelopment in a city that would have happened anyway. We've got to take seriously where that money is coming from and where it's going.
Thank you very much.
Come up there, okay.
You've never been bashful.
I recognize that voice.
It's the face you can't stand.
See you down at City Council frequently. Anyway, first of all, I wanted to read something which I'm sorry, pardon me. Yeah, Jarvis Ross. I was a 6-year member of the Peninsula Community Planning Board. I retired in the year 2000, and I've been going down to City Council since that time, practically every Tuesday. The thing that I have sent some things into the UT once in a great while. This one didn't get published, but it's pertinent, I think. And this had to do with some things that were in the dialogue section very recently. And it said, it's not the city's job to bail out the state. That was in the dialogue, January 27th in the UT. What the author, Councilman Faulkner, admits is, it's not the local taxpayers' job to bail out developers who contribute to mayoral and council members' election campaigns. Furthermore, no one is questioning the original intent of redevelopment jump-starting, revitalization of true blight such as downtown was 40 years ago. Redevelopment, however, was never intended to be an ongoing diversion of tax dollars to maintain more governmental bureaucracy such as CCDC. The biggest scam is supporting development of more hotels, and they're hiring cheap labor and then claiming the taxpayers need to build affordable housing for their employees. History shows that the real beneficiaries of long-term redevelopment are favored developers, agency employees, consultants, and bond brokers, all at the expense of public services. Finally, need one mention, redevelopment abuse, such as Grand Havana, destruction of a tax-paying business by CCDC, Grantville theft of funds by the Redevelopment Agency, NTC, failure to protect the public's investment, or Skate World, which is a proposed destruction of another tax-paying business. Fiscal conservatism demands that we support the governor's proposition. There's a few other comments I'd like to make. First of all, the developers, as we know, are pretty much run this city. And one of the things that we have to look at is, and this is one of the things that Mignon Scherer has been a strong advocate of pointing out, is we cannot, in this city, in this state, in the world, sustain infinite population growth. There is a problem, as we know here, as we've seen our water bills go up. That's a problem not just here, it's all over the world. It's potable water is a problem. And one of the things that I often comment about in my puckish sense of humor is, oh, we can build them affordable housing, but they won't have any water that they can afford to take a shower in or to drink as the price of water goes up. Another thing is that I see happening is I've gone down to the city because there were some things that I was concerned about, and this had to do with code enforcement. What I've seen pointed out around the city frequently are buildings that are in disrepair, property piled up with junk on it, so on. That's a code enforcement problem, but then the developers or the downtown redevelopment agency comes around, oh, this neighborhood's blighted. Where was code enforcement? You wouldn't have had the blight there if there was code enforcement going on. But just try and get it done. I've been down there, they say, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough people for enforcement. Also, we have this thing about affordable housing and a percentage of new construction, new home construction, whatever, percentage. Oh, how do we get around that, says a developer. Oh, we force the city to have an in lieu of fee. There goes your affordable housing that was supposed to be built. I applaud a lot of what you have to say. I am a supporter of the original concept of redevelopment. The problem that I have here and what's happening around the country, and that is it's become an agency unto itself ad infinitum. That needs to stop. That needs to go. I don't have a problem with somebody creating temporarily an agency to say, look, we need to address this particular situation. And as far as infrastructure goes, that I do take some exception. I think if we have the money that is going to the developers, who in turn are paying the politicians, if we had that money going into infrastructure, and I'm a strong supporter, we need schools. I support what the other party said. The schools, our police, our fire, our libraries, our rec centers, those need to be preserved. We don't need all the redevelopment that is going on. Thank you. Please.
My name's Laura Rigo, and I'm from Eastern area. And before Grantville happened, the exact same tactics were used to develop the Crossroads redevelopment area. We don't have blight either. You're supposed to have substantial, prevalent blight to be determined to be a redevelopment agency. They had this group come in, and they based our blight on code violations that had been remedied. So they had a whole list of code violations that had been remedied, and said because there ever were code violations in existence, ever, that was our blight. We started out having 50 acres to 100 acres designated as areas that maybe had significant blight, that maybe could be improved. We ended up with over 1,000 acres in my neighborhood that are the redevelopment area. If you look at North Park redevelopment, City Heights redevelopment, and Eastern area redevelopment, and college redevelopment areas, if you look at them, they all have every lot and every parcel that is multifamily housing and commercial housing within their redevelopment boundaries. And they are the most jagged, weird boundaries you've ever seen in your life. And it creates a whole corridor along El Cajon Boulevard all the way down. It continues into North Bay. Grantville's not blighted, North Bay's not blighted. Crossroads is not blighted. CCDC is no longer blighted. There are areas that I do think that can use redevelopment justly, and those are City Heights and Southeastern, as well as Barrio Villa. Unfortunately, there is a whole agency called the California Redevelopment Agency, and they are builders, and they not only have builders funding them, they have started to create, well, they've created groups that go out and do what they call a turnkey-like study. That's what was done with Granville, that's what was done with Crossroads prior to Granville. Same people, exact same study. You can go page by page and just flip them over. It's ludicrous, just ludicrous. We do need reform. I do think that redevelopment has a place within the state and making things improve, but we have to be able to use the money to transfer affordable housing throughout the city. It can't just be forced in your neighborhood or forced into City Heights or forced into my neighborhood or any other area that's blighted, quote unquote, and a redevelopment area. So we need that reform. We also need, I'm sorry, you know, the schools need to get better. I'm all for money going to schools, but we have got a deplorable situation in our education. So we've got to get that figured out as well. We also have, before anything happens to Prop 13, I want to see welfare taken care of. And I want to see something happen with the illegal aliens that we're supporting throughout the state. And it's costing us billions of dollars. Those two things need to be taken care of. We do need redevelopment reform, but I think that we need to say, get rid of all of it. If you think that you're valid, reapply, and we'll relook at it and come to us with ideas on how to reform it.
I don't think I asked you for your name.
Laura Rebo, and I'm from Eastern Area Planning Committee.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I am on the Eastern Area Planning Committee, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking on my own behalf, but I'm in that neighborhood.
I hear you. Just so, in case you're wondering, I will not call on the same person to speak a second time until everybody who hasn't had a chance to speak has. Please.
My name is Cynthia Conger. I also served 6 years on the Peninsula Community Planning Board. I'm maybe running again because of what's been going on. NTC was on the books before we came on. We really learned what redevelopment was, how bad it could get. Anybody think Point Loma is blighted? No, we're one of the wealthiest areas of the city. Yet because NTC was a former base, they are redevelopment. But they don't have any tax increment. So all of the money from that whole development, in fact, the first year before they built any houses, Macmillan, under NTC Foundation oversight, they got $16 million of property tax, public property tax. What did they do with it? Well, they changed around in the DDA, the Development and Disposition Agreement, to go ahead and do whatever they wanted with no oversight, really. The Planning Board now has been taken over by developers. Macmillan has put in all of his own people. The problem is they created 350 new homes, a whole new generation of kids with not any new schools, no mitigation for the traffic. None of the infrastructure was done. The recreational facilities weren't built. They tried to sell off everything that they could. So you have a lot of problems. Everything that's supposed to go with redevelopment to take care of the population that they develop, multi-density, is not there. They bought it for 361 acres, $8 on what was then $250 a square foot property. And of course, I have been on this, not on PCBD, but the North Bay, on the committee there with the North Bay redevelopment. I'm in agreement. North Bay is not in blighted areas. Walter Anderson was told that he was going to lose his property that he's owned forever, 80 years plus, and he could rent out some property in the North Bay redevelopment to have his nursery. Let's go ahead and take an existing business that's doing well and get rid of it. Again, also involved with Friends of Skate World, getting rid of the only skating rink in the city of San Diego left. One that's bringing in $250,000 net revenues You're talking about getting rid of this business to put a private nonprofit inside the publicly owned property that brings not any sales taxes. It's dependent upon public funding, at least 30 to 50%, and it brings in no property taxes. As a nonprofit, your property taxes are really held up. So it doesn't meet any requirements for meeting redevelopment standards. Why are they pushing this? And the community is totally against it. They want, how many areas would you like to have? 300 kids a day come and be occupied there. All races, all creeds, all colors, having fun, getting along, all ages, grandparents to little 3-year-olds. And they want to get rid of this kind of thing. There is something wrong, and it's called greed. And I think what Schwarzenegger got proposed by all of his supporters, developers on both sides, well, you know, 80% of the taxes for the property taxes, they go to the state. And if you build more units, you'll get more taxes. This is just my own thinking. But the problem is most of the redevelopment, the new units, the housing units, get stuck in redevelopment areas. That's where the builders build them because they know they can get the land almost for free, and then they can get, as I said, $35 million for 56 condo/housing units that are not even affordable in a wealthy area. That's $583,000 per unit. How does that make sense? I'm totally in agreement with reform, but I think we need to abolish.
5 minutes, that's when I stand up.
Okay, we need to abolish and get it around. I have many more situations if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
I think there was a hand back here that I saw before. I'll get to you next.
Okay.
Richard? Oh my. Is that another hand back there?
Oh, no, he's not eligible.
Hi, my name is Ann Schulem. I'm a Navy immigrant to San Diego. When my family arrived here in the 60s, we were, we lived in Lemon Grove briefly, but we returned to San Diego, lived in Navy housing in Linda Vista. And I am well acquainted with the evolution of Linda Vista because most of my life here I've lived Linda Vista, Kearny Mesa. Skate World. I want to address Skate World as an example of the abomination of redevelopment. Skate World, if my memory serves me correctly, what I learned was part of the original Linda Vista Shopping Center. The shopping center was built in World War II. It was the first independent shopping center in the whole country. It was built to serve the families of war workers who lived in the housing that was put up almost overnight in Linda Vista, with frames built of redwood because there was enough redwood to serve the world, and oak floors. The women had to be able to shop and take care of their children, so the shopping center was built in a circle with a large grass lawn in the middle. The children could play while the mothers went around the different little shops doing their things with one anchor department store. And there was a great movie house and for a long time. And then the skate world. I mean, the children had to have a place to recreate. Families did. So the skating rink was built, and everybody skated in the 40s, right? And wood was cheap, so you could build a skating rink. Now, I heard recently that there was a very strong possibility that that corner would be redeveloped and Skate World would be torn out. That is absolutely abominable because since the 1940s, Linda Vista has been a point of arrival for immigrants. I mean, the people who came here to work during World War II were immigrants. They came from all over the country. The men had to work in the shipyards and support services, and the families were there. I mean, you walk around now, and it's like, okay, those little short brown people from Mexico, they're Oaxacan Indians. In the 70s, it was the Hmongs people from Vietnam, and it has just been a continuous cycle of evolution. What does redevelopment care about any neighborhood? Whether it is prosperous like Point Loma or a little rough on the cuff like Linda Vista. Redevelopment doesn't care squat. Okay? Doesn't care squat. I want to see redevelopment commissions abolished, absolutely abolished. Neighborhoods evolve on their own, and responsible developers work with communities. right? You take away that skating rink in Linda Vista, you wound Linda Vista greatly, because most of the people who live up there have minimal resources. They need local entertainment. But people come from all over the place to skate. It's the only roller rink in San Diego left. The others were all torn down. It's the library, Linda Vista Branch Library, is more used than almost any branch library in the city because it's the living room and study hall for hundreds and hundreds of families. Children, teenagers, adults, has an intense tutoring program going on. The librarians do a wonderful job. I just had to speak specifically to Skate World. Okay, I had disastrous experiences there in high school and didn't pursue it. But I am glad that it's there for thousands and thousands of other people. Okay, and I've spoken my word. Thank you very much.
Most goodwill and property any business in the entire city.
We used to watch the Flash Gordon movies there.
Hey, Richard, there's some folks back over that way
that I'm not seeing? Oh, please, excuse me. I had those eyes removed from the back of my head.
When your kids grow up, right?
Hello, my name is Daniel Beeman. I ran for city council in the 3rd district in 1999. I was involved in redevelopment prior to that. I was on the North Park Redevelopment Path Project Area Committee. At that time, when I was on that committee and serving there, and I lived in the community of North Park, the city of San Diego and CCDC got together and decided that they needed $3 million of our increment to develop a motel into a homeless kind of shelter rehab thing. I don't know really what they were going to do because they never told us. They didn't really care what we wanted. They just took our bonding money, because as we learned, that the increment comes because you have to bond out for it. Well, let's look at how financing works in the city. When you get a bond, that means you have to go out and you have to sell bonds. To sell the bonds, you have to have insurance. And then you have to have a financing creator, somebody who's going to create the bonds and the financing. Then you're limited to who can get it. And sometimes you can get the bonds tax-free. Well, how many bonds do you have to buy? $25,000 or more generally. So guess who stuck out? The little man, the blue-collar workers stuck out. The rich gain the good wealth with little tax implications for them. So there's the first part. The second part is then they come in and they have all this financing that they have to do and insurance. So all their buddies get a little extra pie. You know, they all get a little piece of the action. And then what happens when a developer comes, like Walmart came, when Walmart came over to the college area, $10 million. They got to write a note for $10 million that they guaranteed the city, that they got guaranteed from the city 8% interest. Walmart, one of the largest corporations in the world. Right. Why did they get that? Because they developed a shopping center down there. And the city wanted that shopping center. What did they get? Their caveat, 2 stores, right? They got Sam's, and they also got their Walmart. And it was on our nickel. Again and again, this happens again and again. You go into the bookwork of what happened downtown, and you will find that many of those bonds were purchased by other municipalities. And they were rated at 8 to 12%. Sometimes a couple of 6, 7 threes thrown in there. But very, very few threes, believe me, very, very few threes. So this is infiltration of money from outside of the area that benefits them. Their friends come in and say, I need to sell this, let's sell this. If you go over to the barrio, that property was played with for many, many years by many political successors. They never developed the market there. But the guy who sold the property made tons of money, and the city was forced to purchase the property and deal with the property even though it never developed. This is it's so sick, it's unbelievable. And it's continuing today. Downtown is over $1 billion worth of bond, as far as I can calculate right now. What do? They do not pay the bond off. They pay the minimal amount that they can pay. They pay as much as they can pay and get away with so that they can continue the insurance rating, so that insurance can continue giving interest to their friends, so that they continue to run the gamut that they do. When it started, Susan Golding, it was 20 to 25 years for a redevelopment agency. She went to the governor and said, can I get an extra 20? He said, sure, why not? 45 years. You know what? If a business can't be successful in 5 years, in my belief, it should not be in business, and we should not keep on funding it. Right. If it's a community of businesses, maybe I'll give you 15 or 20 years to try to do something. If you can't, you've got to get on with it. And that's what we have to do, is we've got to set up the parameters. We need to go down there and we have to demand it. We have to go to the State House and we have to demand it. If we don't demand these things, these billions of dollars will keep on robbing us. I mean, $1 billion here or there is big money to me. And he's talking, you know, the governor's talking about $8 billion. So we got to do it. We have to reform, we have to change it. And if this is the way, I think we need to try it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Kathleen McLeod. I was on the Encanto Neighborhoods Community Planning Group for about 8 years. And I first became concerned about redevelopment about 10 years ago under SEDC. And when I found out about the horrendous deal that was done with Imperial Marketplace, and that was before Brian came in, but that's why I'm so pleased to hear that he talked about a 1-to-4 ratio of what so that the developer has some risk involved. That deal, I've got papers of it. It was first written up by CPI, and it is what, developed what, early 90s? 93, something like that. Maybe they got it online. It's 20 years we will get before you see any benefit. The city, like was just mentioned, the developer will use it as a piggy bank. He loaned the redevelopment agency $5 million. And how are we paying that back? Then the city then took money away from, I think it was some other Transnet or something, a couple other things. They reshifted priorities from other funding sources to put in $5 million. So it's supposedly a mix. No, this was a loan from the developer. His $5 million. It wasn't a regular deal. How are we paying back that $5 million? I'll tell you, he gets 100% of the TIF for 20 years, I think, or 15 years, for part of it. The other part, they created, the city now is giving this, that's not all of it. He gets a half of every other TIF that the whole Central Imperial area generates, and we have now a pretty good private redevelopment that's being done by the Jacobs Family Foundation. Totally private. That any increment they generate, no, it goes to this Santa Monica-based developer, rather than that we get it. The other part of that loan is there's a new scheme out there, a sham called parking lots. One of them was with College Grove. We had one there in Imperial Marketplace, and the third one is in San Isidro. And what they do in order to repay the loan that the developer used as a piggy bank, they create something they call a parking lot. Say, oh gee, will you let people drive in there and use it as a park and ride? We'll pay you $100,000 a year, and we pay for it out of sales tax. So any amount of whatever it's generating, supposedly some gain to this general fund, is really going back to the developer on a loan rather than their little share of this investment. I just think a big part of this, the taxpayers need to know when these projects will generate an income and get back. What year is it? Year 25, year 18? And it needs to be shown, just like any capital improvement project we have in the city. You can't get any of these projects, how their long-term funding is, and when it comes back as a gain to the public. Right, and that's the other thing about you know, the projects need to get back on the rolls. There is one, I don't know if Brian, he might know it, but I had just learned about it. And it was the Margaret Creek Industrial Area. Tiny, one square block in our neighborhood. It's back on the rolls. It came as what redevelopment was intended to do. It was blighted, nothing. When they turned it around, made a few shops, it's going fine, back on the rolls. It works, you know, but it's small. And I don't know anybody else. I have of no other project that has indeed gone back on the property rolls and generating income. We need a lot more about accountability and transparency. Accountability, the job should go to people in the blighted areas. There's no reporting on this. They just say, oh, we generate this. Well, what is that? Maybe it's somebody coming who already had another job elsewhere. It's the people in the blighted areas that need the jobs, and they need to be accountable for that. I've got a few more things. Too much time?
Yeah, I'm going to shut you off here.
Oh. The point of this, the big point of it, it needs to be to benefit the residents, and all those deals need to go to them first. If there's going to be rezoning like we tried over here at Valencia Business Park, oh, it's industrial, and then I'm going to flip it to make it a commercial at Big J. That should happen before. If that's the plan, and so that the people who own it, who are residents there, they can get the benefit, not the developer.
Thank you,
anything.
Kathleen.
Okay.
Okay, Richard, then you got Ian Trowbridge. He's just itching to talk.
Ian's here?
Yeah. Yeah. They had a fire over there.
I'd like to go after Ian. I'm actually old enough to have remembered 40 years ago downtown.
Would you tell us your name, please?
Oh, Dan Soderberg.
Thank you.
The revitalization of downtown, but in that discussion there was one very important element that was left out. And that was the fact that downtown was revitalized by the renovation of the gas transporter. Historic preservation was a very key element in downtown coming back. So I think that's a very important thing to point out. And through the years, redevelopment has and has not been different issues, friends of historic preservation. You know, the Horton Plaza or the Horton Mall is credited for a lot of that revitalization, but they tore down at least 3 very beautiful buildings right at Horton Plaza, the Rio Theater, those particular buildings there. And very bad decision. The ugly building that was put there, it was ugly when it was built, it's ugly now, and thank God they're going to be tearing it down to make it into a public plaza. I just want to point out that, you know, people come to San Diego not to admire our condo projects, these slick buildings all over the place. No, they come to enjoy the Gaslamp Quarter, Balboa Park, Hotel Coronado. These are the things, and I might mention the historic neighborhoods. And with the implementation of the Mills Act, that was a revitalization effort right there. It stimulated a huge growth of our historic neighborhoods coming back. So, as terms of redevelopment, personally, I don't have the answer, because I've seen it work both ways. And I just ask the question now: why does it take a huge smackdown from the governor to cause this sudden concern for reforming a very bad system that's had so many abuses we just heard? And following that, I do ask another question: where is the affordable housing that's been created?
Yes.
You know, downtown, as I say, I remember how it was and how it's changed, but there are more homeless people downtown than I can ever remember. It's just horrible. And so where is it? That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There apparently is an overwhelming sense in the meeting that Ian Trowbridge should be allowed to take the podium.
We need a mayoral candidate to speak to us.
Oh, while he's on the way, could I see hands of others who are still wanting to get on? Oh my goodness, one. Well, we're about to answer separately. 1, 2. 4, 5, it looks like 6. Okay, thank you.
So I want to start by saying the fact you're here tonight means you care about your city. So that whatever disagreements we may have, you are working to make things better.
Amen.
And I think that's extremely important. I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories, a lot of rhetoric, and a lot of people telling me what's wrong. And that's easy to do. What's more difficult to do is to think of how you fix this thing. And in my opinion, it's difficult to do that at the moment because you don't know what's going to pass in Sacramento. You have no idea of where the mayor and his people are going to go. I will tell you that in general, I'm against redevelopment because it's been so abused in this city. And while I love Brian, I'll say two things. You did very well at Southeast Development Corporation, but you had a low bar to pass after the previous CEO. And second, I disagree with you that downtown is a real example of good redevelopment. I believe it's sterile. I believe it doesn't have neighborhoods. I believe the infrastructure that's necessary isn't in there, schools, fire stations, and that's all because CCDC basically was, for the last 20 years, giving money to subsidize developers. That I believe. However, that can change. And what's important to me, one of the things, is affordable housing. And again, I don't have a complete solution. I think Teresa over there would be able to provide much better specific ideas of how affordable housing can work. But redevelopment in some areas really has worked. I think you would agree in City Heights that it's worked pretty well.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should throw it out entirely. But I am sort of encouraged by the fact we start from two different ends of the spectrum. One is, let's reform redevelopment or let's get rid of it. And reform means really big reform. And if you guys can become part of a network in this city, I can tell you from my experience, you get an awful lot done that you wouldn't get done if you just stick to your own parochial issues. You have to interact and network. You don't need committees, you just need a telephone, email, and Facebook. That's it, I'm finished. Thank you.
I'll try not to take it too personally what you said earlier about us politicians in Sacramento. I'm Lori Saldana. I grew up just a few miles from here, and until recently I represented this community in the state legislature. I did not support the redevelopment bill, SB 863, that went through in the middle of the night. I chaired housing and community development, and I knew that that was a flawed bill. And it really bothered me to be smooth about it, that Nathan Fletcher, Marty Block, and others were working the votes on that bill on the floor on the final night of session. And little did I know, as I flew back and I called some reporters and they were calling me, and I said, they did us a favor, because they are going to force scrutiny on redevelopment all around the state as a result of their actions. Redevelopment cannot stand. The way we did redevelopment in the last century is not the way we can do redevelopment in the new century. I was saying all this back in October, before Jerry Brown was elected, and I was so angry and I was so frustrated. And I think you have an opportunity. In 2 weeks, John Chung, our state controller, will be here in San Diego addressing the Rancho Santa Fe Democratic Club. I would encourage you to go up and talk to him when he is here in San Diego. The Democratic Club is open to the public. You don't have to be a Democrat, you don't have to be from Rancho Santa Fe to go and tell John Chung there is a big problem with redevelopment here in San Diego, and you are not happy with the way it has been used for your communities for many years. I think that we need to mend it, not end it. I think that there is a use for it, but there needs to be transparency. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be jobs that are living wage jobs as a result of redevelopment, not a lot of service industry jobs where people work 2 or 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet. I think if we use redevelopment for job creation and real jobs, or just say long-term jobs, living wage jobs, or say, look, we're going to put a certain group of people to work on a temporary basis to get them skills, to get them out of unemployment. There's a lot of things we can do. But John Chung is a smart guy, and the governor has given him the task to review redevelopment statewide, and he needs to hear what you were saying about your frustration, about the examples, about the programs that have happened here that have been failures from the local perspective. So I really encourage you to go up there on March 16th. It's going to be at the Rancho Santa Fe Clubhouse. Like I say, it's open to the public. He will be there speaking to the Democratic Club, and he needs to hear from people who are concerned about how redevelopment has been abused here in San Diego. And so, let me just say one thing about, I think we need to change the idea of affordable housing. I've seen other cities around California who have built supportive housing. It's meant to be temporary, it's meant to get people off their feet, off the streets, with counseling, with supportive services wrapped around their lodging, and move them on so that they are able to get on with their lives. That is what's missing in San Diego because the county refuses to participate, and the city refuses to participate. And I was downtown testifying Monday, and as I parked and walked across the street from City Hall, there was a whole encampment of people living out of their shopping carts. It is shameful. It is shameful. And I'll just wrap up by saying, I am on sabbatical. I've left the assembly. I have not returned to teaching. I'm taking the sabbatical I never got when I got elected. And I'm working on policy, and I'm working on attending groups like this, listening to what people have to say, and doing my own presentations on the state, how we got here, how the budget got so bad, what is on autopilot. So much of our budget is on an autopilot spending. And I'm really serious about listening to what people have to say about the problems, and as much as possible giving you some steps to take, as Ian was saying. It doesn't take much to be effective. It takes a group of people committed to change, working together, and pushing for that change. And John Chung is a great person to hear what you have to say. So I really encourage you to be up there and talk to him. It starts, I left my BlackBerry on my table. I think it's 7 o'clock. And it's up at the Rancho Santa Fe Clubhouse. 7 in the evening. 7 in the evening on March 16th.
If you sign the sign-up sheet, we'll get the details and be sure you get an email with those details.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Lori's comments about John Chung. One of the really sane, objective people in Sacramento who could count and realize that you can't spend more than you have in the bank at any time. You know, I've talked to him on a number of occasions, and I couldn't think that there'd be a better person to take a look at the way that the system should be reformed than John.
Very smart guy, just got reelected to 4 more years to work with Governor Brown. He needs to hear what you guys are saying here tonight.
Thank you again.
This will just be a brief object lesson on the most recent redevelopment project in the city of San Diego. It's $200 million.
Your name, please.
Scott Andrews.
Thank you.
It's the Embarcadero downtown, our waterfront. Yeah. The law is the Port Master Plan, and that says there'll be a 5-acre central park. There'll be grass end to end. There'll be 3 public piers. basically recreating the waterfronts of San Francisco or Santa Barbara. Well, the mayor got a phone call or had some meetings with Carnival Corporation, a multinational monopolistic firm that owns the cruise ship industry, registered in Panama. And they told the mayor they wanted a second brand new terminal. So the mayor said, okay. And then they said, will you build it for us for free? The mayor said, okay. They said, will you cancel the law, the port master plan for us to do this? Mayor said, okay. What else do you want? Will you waive our wharfage fees? Mayor said, okay. So that's what happened in the middle of the night. So the designer of all these parks, who had spent about $10 million designing, got a phone call from the mayor, Mark Johnson of Civitas. And the mayor said, we're going to throw out the port master plan. We're going to build this new terminal for Carnival. That means we have to eliminate Broadway Landing Park. And of course, to line up all the buses and vans and cabs for Carnival. Remember, this is 3,000 to 4,000 people, load and offload of each cruise ship disembarking. So to handle that traffic load, you have to reconfigure Harbor Drive. So they did that as well. And then the consultant for the port, the support project funded by CCDC, port is broke. 12 million in the red. They're so terribly mismanaged, basically by sweetheart lease deals, under lease. But, so what happened was, the port got involved and asked CCDC to fund this, and they just sprung this on the public with no review at all, that we're going to do all these changes for Carnival. Well, I'll fast forward to the present. We now have a new terminal, and Carnival's left town. So we did a little research early on, and we found that the Carnival had met with the mayor in 08. The last day of 08, first day of the first week of 09, and said, we don't want a new terminal. We've just done some economic studies, and our projections show we don't want or need one. And that was based just on the economy. That was before the recession and before the violence in Mexican ports. Prior to those, they told the mayor in a personal meeting with the mayor, we don't want it. Well, the mayor said we're going to build it anyway.
Oh, wow.
This shows you the corrupt, make-work aspect of a lot of redevelopment. Now, why would a mayor in a broke city where children are dying because fire stations are closed, where libraries are unexpanded and unbooked and closed? So in other words, he can't handle security and essential services anyway. Why would he go ahead and spend $28 million on the terminal and then push forward for the whole project? The project includes, by the way, 5 buildings in the middle of the Embarcadero blocking the view to serve Carnival. Huge ticket kiosk pavilions, restrooms, cafes, etc., all right at the foot of Broadway Pier to serve the new terminal. So we ask ourselves, why would he then push this unwanted project? Lawyers call it an unwilling party all of a sudden to this deal. Well, he pushed it because the big consultant, it turns out, is Project Design Consultants down there. And they have 20 projects bordering this project, 20 high-rise projects. They represent BOSA Development, Manchester, the Lane Field Development, Irvine Company. They also represent the port. So here's a massive conflict of interest. And that's the kind of dirty deal. Now what happens is, do I have two more minutes?
You have one.
One more minute? What happens is, so that we ask, why does Kevin Faulconer continue to passionately fight for this deal that should just go away? Massive bundles in contributions from project design consultants. So you see how a make-work project with a huge conflict of interest literally lines the pockets and gets the district council member and the mayor's man reelected. So these are criminal behavior that need to be pursued that are not. But it just is it's a good little object lesson for us.
Epton. I'm director of the San Diego Renters Union. And in my neighborhood of Cherokee, louder? Yes. In my neighborhood of Cherokee Point, we've seen really no benefits from redevelopment. The mayor of City Heights is here, Jim Varnador, he can attest to that. But
that's not true, Rocky, in both counts.
All right. The problem with redevelopment, it's become an entitlement for corporations and developers, and they've almost addicted to redevelopment money. Most of those projects, not all, but most of those projects downtown the infrastructure improvements that you see down there, those developers should have paid for it, not us. And it's true throughout the city. For me, I think if redevelopment was to do what it was promising to do, and that is to build really affordable housing, I would be for it, but it's not. It's like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's just not there. I took the tour of CCDC, what was it, Richard, a few years ago, downtown, 5 years ago or something. And to them, even then, they were talking about affordable housing, $250,000 condos. And I would say 95% of the renters who belong to our organization couldn't qualify for that. So it's certainly not affordable. Been very little rental housing built with redevelopment funds. And we've got to remember that redevelopment also has its victims. And we don't talk about them. And it's because of the gentrification of neighborhoods. If you go down to Barrio Logan, you see families down there who have lived in the same house for 3 generations are being moved out because of redevelopment. If redevelopment would take care of all the different classes of people that it affected, then I would be more for it than I am, but it doesn't. It's just for moderate or upper middle class people that it's really helping. It's not helping anybody out there in the poor. We have 50,000 people on a waiting list for rental assistance in this city. Another 70,000 people are on another list for public housing. There's a lot of people out there hurting because of redevelopment, and it hasn't taken care of those people that have been really impacted for it. And I think anytime we talk about doing away with it, keeping it, we need to realize that there are people who suffer either way, and we need to look at them. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I am still Jim Varnador. I do still live in City Heights, which is still America's finest community. I am the chief cheerleader. I am its ambassador. I am not its mayor. And we do have affordable housing.
That was a joke.
I'll probably get assassinated before I step down from this place because I'm just about to irritate everybody in the house. No, I'm not a developer. Fred Schnabel and I served together on the board of directors of the San Diego Board of Realtors when it was in Mission Valley.
And when these people were in high school.
In the lower building, remember that?
Yes.
When a fellow named Jerry was the executive director. That's how far back you and I go. Right. So I've been reading your stuff all along and disagreeing with you.
Not really.
Yes, sir.
Well, so far you haven't.
I don't have any war stories to tell you. The City Heights redevelopment project is a redevelopment project that I know intimately. I've been a part of its project area committee since its re-inception 16 years ago. I did serve as its vice chair for a period of time. I have not held office there since then. I think I've missed 3 meetings in 16 years. So if it comes to the City Heights redevelopment project, I know what it's about. I know what it's about. The City Heights redevelopment project is devoting money to infrastructure. We are putting money into streetlights, into sidewalks, and into parks. We are not spending a lot of redevelopment money to put in low and moderate income housing because we have a lot of low and moderate income housing right now. It's not enough to suit Lyle Neptune, one of our neighbors, but Lyle would like to have more affordable housing that doesn't have schools, that doesn't have parks, that doesn't have playgrounds, that doesn't have amenities and recreational facilities, just build a house that somebody can live in, and to hell with the social consequences. My redevelopment project and the planning committee that's in my community won't tolerate that. If you're going to build low and moderate income housing, we don't use the term affordable anymore. In City Heights, we think you ought to build it with parking on site, with amenities on site. We ought to put in a parking lot, we ought to put in play space for kids. We ought to make contributions to the schools. We ought to quit doing what everybody here hates doing, that's giving money to developers. We generally don't do that. So, where are we now? Well, I want to join Brian in being one of the very few people in this room who understand redevelopment from the inside and from the bottom, from the inside out and from the bottom up. I've been in the trenches with him and even before him, so I understand what it's about, ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of the war stories you hear here are pathetic and wonderful, and I'm sorry they happened, but they didn't happen in City Heights. So let's leave it go at that. I do want to reform redevelopment. I think it's a great idea. I like some of your ideas, and I intend to give them to the governor. It is true that I have friends in low places, including in Sacramento. It's true. It is true that I've been talking to the governor's people, close to the governor. It's true that I've been suggesting we keep redevelopment and fix it. It is true that I've been recommending to the governor that he take 1 or 2 years of tax increment funding from the redevelopment agencies, fix the damn budget, and get the teachers back to work. And then, when the economy comes back around and redevelopment can be restored and refurbished and repaired, let's do it that way. That's my position. And I'm probably the only guy in the room that holds that position. Keep it, fix it, give the governor the money, stop fooling around calling housing affordable when it isn't, and let's get on with life. I'll be glad to take questions.
Not now, you won't.
Somebody's supposed to assassinate me. Come
on. Please, 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 not yet. There are other people.
I was on a committee with Jim.
He's in charge.
Okay.
Cynthia, wait.
Cynthia's one of my...
I know there are folks out there who are still wanting to get the floor, so please, sir. Yes, I'm sorry. I know you're back there, too. I won't forget you.
Well, Jim, when I listen to you, you hear where it's supposed to be being used. Is in City Heights and Southeast San Diego, yes. But I don't know if any of you watched or paid attention when Jerry Brown said he was going to abolish redevelopment as it is, that the mayor stood up and went on record. But did anybody notice where he went on record? It wasn't City Hall. Where the Union Tribune said he made his first comments was Symphony Towers. Does anybody know who resides at Symphony Towers?
University Club.
Yes, but what entity?
The Urban Land Institute.
No.
The Symphony. Okay, tell us.
The person is Seltzer, Kaplan, McMahon, and Vitek.
Oh.
And I spent 6 months because I wanted to know who done it, who stole Naval Training Center. And so I started putting all the pieces together. And you find out that all roads in this city run to Seltzer, Kaplan, McMahon, and Vitek. They have people on CCDC. There was a letter that the city had, and it said that Brian Seltzer was on the chalkboard saying this is how we are going to steal Naval Training Center, telling the city how to do it. If you take a look at virtually every single corrupt deal, not the Warner stories, where the nickels and dimes are small, but the big ones, you find Seltzer, Kaplan, McMahon, and Vitek. You find his chief of staff came out of their office. You find that the city attorney came out of their office. And you can go on to every board and commission, port district. They control these people. So the problem isn't redevelopment. The problem is that there are certain people in this city that have perfected the art of using redevelopment as a thievery game. And if you continue to look beyond Seltzer, Kaplan, McMahon, and Vitek, you know who they're the lawyer for?
Every developer in town.
That's them, and also Pete Wilson. And you know, when you were talking about Arnie going to Warren Buffett, no, that's not where his lawyer was lying. Arnold Schwarzenegger's mentor was Pete Wilson. So this is the challenge. It's not that redevelopment is bad, it's that bad people are controlling the redevelopment. And those bad people not only control redevelopment, but they are the ones nominating every single judge in this town. And do you think any of those judges are going to rule against the boys? And we had 4 lawsuits that were clearly in the public favor, and every one of them got slapped down. I went into an office once with a guy who actually had been, worked for people. So, and the honest thing about it was, I was just sitting there and listening to him. And he started telling me that you can't rule in the public's favor. This is an appellate judge. And he said you couldn't do it because there's a boys club. And if you go against that boys club, you ain't going nowhere. And that's why San Diego is kind of like a cancer on the state of California. If you want to take any great idea and pervert it, you come to San Diego. And I hope that out of this little group, it's always nice to see more and more people who actually have an interest, that maybe instead we can flip the tables and start making sure that good ideas are pulled in here. And somehow we all work together to raise the awareness of the people that needs to happen. Thank you.
John, let me get your last name.
Say it again, we didn't hear.
McNabb.
That's what we want to do.
Yes.
So we know where to do it.
Yes. I think this is going to be our last speaker. There's going to be one more. There's going to be one more speaker after this one, and and as far as second rounds are concerned, you're going to have to wait till there are a couple of other pieces of business that we need to take care of. So those of you who are anxious to get into second word, you're going to have to wait a bit.
Today was kind of a stressful day for me because my house was broken into last night. I was in the house. We didn't realize that our computer was stolen, my purse was stolen, our car was stolen. Right now, I would like to see more money go to police. I had to get a ride here because I had no car today. I also had pictures of a friend of a lot of people here who had a 90th birthday party in my camera and my purse that was stolen, and my new Christmas present, a $500 camera.
Would you tell your name, please?
I'm here.
Would you give up your name, please?
Kathy Blavitt.
Thank you.
For 12 years, I was very active in this, and I ran for office a while ago, and the one good thing that came out with that was that there was a couple who was going to be eminent domain, so their $8 million property could become part of a used car dealership. And I put the focus on that, and Donna Fry put the focus on that, and people started calling that car dealership and say, we are not going to buy cars from you. And within a few days, they offered those people just under $8 million for their property. I also went to a PAC meeting at North Bay Redevelopment, and Manny, an 83-year-old Portuguese guy, showed us documents of 4 years of being hassled by this city to get his property. He had plans for his own property. He wanted to save these for his children. I videotaped this. He talked about coming here during World War II, about being a tuna fisherman, about buying these properties and wanting to keep them for his kids. And that day, they had offered him $40,000 for this $3 million piece of property, gone up to $400 million. They found out he had showed us this paperwork, and they said, we'll give you another $1 million if you do not give them copies of the paperwork. He was so broken down, he went ahead and took it. 6 months later, he told us he wished he'd never done it, and he died soon after that. I have story after story. I have them planning a guy's property near the brewery, saying they couldn't get a hold of him. His number was 6 feet high on the wall of the building, that you could read it from the highway, and the city and the developer said they couldn't get a hold of him, and they were going ahead and developing his property. This is Vic Mayhoff. He lives on Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, and he had his own plans for that property. A lot of these properties are not getting taken care of because these people are afraid they're going to get taken or they're going to be rezoned to something else. He had some great plans for that property. I live in Ocean Beach, and like I say, I was an activist. Now, I'm a historian. I sit on the Ocean Beach Historical Board, and I love it. And, you know, you say historian, and they love you. You say activist, and they run. And so I really like it. Plus, we have parties. We have historic people come in, and it's just really neat. So just call yourself a historian, and they'll like you a lot more. But, you know, but there has been abuses, and it's been all over this city. Donna Fry brought it out when they were paying $400, us taxpayers, $400 a unit for the low-income housing. $400,000 a unit on the Linda Vista property at the North Bay PAC. I sat in on those meetings, and, you know, the same inside boys doing their deals. The YMCA got redevelopment money at the same time that we're cutting pools. You know, OB fought redevelopment. I'll go quickly here. OB fought redevelopment, and we have a cottage program down there. And we're one of the last beach cities left. And our property values are actually holding better than a lot of the rest of San Diego without redevelopment. And the community really gets together and tries. But the neat thing about it is a community, it is doing well. The sad thing about it is they wanted to close our library last year. They've cut our rec center hours. You know why? Because unfortunately City Heights, yes, they have a great new library, great new tennis courts, great new basketball courts, but they have no money to staff that. So non-redevelopment areas like Ocean Beach, we're having our hours and our libraries cut so we can staff the redevelopment areas. And this, you know, this is crazy. We need the money back in the general fund. We need it to go back to the communities, to the police, to the fires, to the teachers. There's plenty of low-income housing right now out there. You know, there's better ways of doing this, and I've got a list here people could look at. NTC, it was the biggest bait and switch. We've got a church down there that's caused all kinds of problems.
Kathy, I think your time is up.
Anyhow, there's a lot of things on the list, and people need to work.
Last because I'm with the San Diego Housing Federation, and I came tonight to talk about affordable housing, which is the unfortunate victim of eliminating the redevelopment agencies. And at least our intelligence today tells us, and I guess most of you will be happy to hear that the redevelopment agencies are about to be eliminated, that the governor's proposal is probably going to be approved by the legislature. So I guess where that brings us is to hoping that we have the continued support of the Affordable Housing Coalition, but also the rest of you in this room for the creation of more affordable homes for low-income working families, for seniors on fixed incomes, for the disabled, and for the homeless who are living out of the shopping cart. Redevelopment has required the creation of affordable housing. You know that there is a 20% low and moderate income set aside. Without that redevelopment requirement, I am concerned that many jurisdictions won't do any more affordable housing at all. And furthermore, the redevelopment is the largest source of local funding for the creation of more affordable homes. And it does that in two ways. One, it actually provides some direct gap financing, but also it leverages that financing 3-to-1. And without redevelopment funds, it's going to be really tough if those funds aren't replaced to create any more affordable housing, period. So what we really need from you all is your support in helping us convince the legislature that if they're going to eliminate redevelopment, that's what they're going to do. That's their decision. But we do need to have some ongoing source of funding for the creation of more affordable homes. And we need to have that replacement revenue as part of the budget package. We don't need it later on in the spring after all the budget deals are made, and then we'll have the same answer that we don't have any more money left to do this. We need it now. We need it as part of the budget package in the next week. And I really do mean in the next week. The governor said that all that the state can afford to do right now is to fund core services. And I really don't know anything that's more core than providing a home and shelter for people. I don't see how children can go to school and succeed if they're living in a car, they're going to school hungry, if they're going to school ill. All of those services are core too, but it all starts with the home, and we really need your help in continuing to have a source of funding for affordable housing in this next year's budget.
Thank you.
When Doris opened her comments, she said she thought that most of the folks in this room favored the abolition. I kind of get a kick out of a new era of abolitionists myself.
I think it's called advocates for redevelopment.
No, the ones I'm talking about are the abolitionists, the ones who want to abolish redevelopment.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm going to convince you. If you're willing, I'd like to see the hands of the folks in the room who would like to abolish redevelopment.
You haven't announced what the other votes are. This is improper.
There's one.
He wants to know what the other choices are.
Yeah, the other choices.
Yeah, you have to qualify that, because there's some variations of your theme.
I'm sorry. There are two choices.
No.
Tonight, there are two choices.
I'm sorry, this is a setup deal. It's a ridiculous vote.
You don't have to vote.
I have to vote for abolishing it if that's my only choice.
You have two choices that relate to the subject for which we were gathered.
That's right.
One was reformed and one was abolished.
Exactly.
Now, if that's unfair,
Would
I
the
apologize.
reform include getting rid of eminent domain?
Reform doesn't include anything.
Then it's nebulous.
Yes, it
It's
is.
meaning, it says trust me, which is what the hell we've been fighting.
Then you don't vote for reform, obviously. Do you?
Good, you've given us our instructions. Thank you.
So those in the room who would vote to abolish redevelopment.
Yes.
Initially. At this moment, yes.
Initially.
Thank you. Those who would reform redevelopment.
Guess I'm all alone, huh?
Not quite.
Call for abstention.
All right, thank you.
Abstentions.
Pardon me?
Call for abstentions.
What actually was accomplished in obtaining affordable housing from all the multi-millions of tax dollars that were diverted from the general fund.
One of the things we assumed in organizing this event is that we weren't going to complete everything we needed to complete in order to feel satisfied that we knew enough about this issue to be able to take action.
There's too much stuff.
And as a consequence,
we may not even have time to do it if Doris's time frame is right. The Affordable Housing Coalition with the Western Institute of Social Research is prepared to conduct over the next 4 weeks a community action think tank on redevelopment, to which all of you are invited. Information about that is here. I know you've never heard of a community think tank, and I know you've never heard of the Western Institute for Social Research. So if you're interested, the announcement is on the colored paper, and the details about the think tank is on the white paper.
How many engineers and accountants have you got to go over this? Because this thing is an engineering and accounting problem, and do-gooders meeting will not solve it. You first of all have a city that has set up its building plan to make everything as expensive as possible. They're so busy screwing us that they haven't got time to do their own business.
Well, we're going to start something.
You've had your second comment. Ian, I know.
I have a longer one.
I'm sure you do. I have some too, but I'm not going to make them. Ian, you have the floor.
Just one comment. We talked about the Northern Embarcadero, and that is my organization. The Navy Broadway Complex Coalition filed suit against the court to remove the cruise ship terminal, and the court case is on Friday, 1:30 in Superior Court. Judge Vargas, and if you're interested, you can come along and listen to your
one other
one misconception.
1:30. It's just one. There are a couple of other comments we'll get to. One, the Affordable Housing Coalition came out of its pocket for those refreshments. Somebody put a hat back there or a bowl or something, and if you want to make a contribution to help with that, and I know that Brian wants to make a pitch for your contributions to help on the legal fund with GAG.
The Grantville Action Group donation hat is on the back table, or should be, by our Grantville Action Group sign. And we are collecting donations for our appeal on the lawsuit. We're looking for about $5,000 to go to appeals. And even though we may not win, we feel it's important to do that.
One moment, please.
To shine a light on redevelopment, keep this thing in the spotlight, and further encourage the governor and the legislature to move forward on abolition of redevelopment.
All right, Jarvis.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank the moderator. I think you did an excellent job. I want to thank all of you from your body who were making presentations. I would make just one or two comments on that direction. One of them is, I never hear the word affordable wages mentioned. Second thing is, where was affordable housing when they were tearing down the SROs? Which I talked to some of the homeless people down there that used to live in the SROs. They tore those down. And then the third thing is, why did we stop the condo conversions from apartment buildings to condos sooner than we did? That knocked out a lot of affordable housing.
I would like to respond to those two comments. The first battle that the Affordable Housing Coalition got in was with the Maryland Hotel, which was being converted to the bloody whatever that hotel is called. Oh, the Ivy, the boutique hotel. And we lost. The city caved in. They had an obligation to replace those units, and the city was told they would not stand up in court. Probably some of those same lawyers we were talking about a minute ago. As far as condo conversions are concerned, the Affordable Housing Coalition was up to over its head in condo conversions, and we did succeed, as you may know, in when they were going at the rate of 10,000 apartments a year, when the typical year prior was 500 or 540. We did get it capped at 1,000. We were trying to get it capped at 500, and we couldn't get it. We couldn't get the council to do it. But there is a cap, and there were some additional pieces to that condo conversion stuff that I think will really do a good thing for the city in the future.
Can I point out, Brian wants to make a comment. You know, the $8 billion in tax increment that's thrown around, and everybody assumes that it will become available for the city's general funds around the state if it stops getting collected by the agencies. About 17 cents of every dollar of tax increment would actually make its way into the city of San Diego's general fund. The other 83 cents will get distributed to the other taxing agencies as every dollar below the base year line is. This is not a windfall for the city. This is not the city getting all the money that otherwise is going to redevelopment. And it would be really inappropriate if you thought that as a result of the redevelopment getting abolished, that the city's budget problems go away. They don't. That's going to be a help for the city, but it's not going to solve the city's fundamental problems with its own structural budget deficit.
As I suggested, we could probably keep this conversation going all night. It's really not fair. I'm sorry. I know. We've gone beyond the announced hour. If you want to stay and talk, I think we do have some time to do that. I want to thank you all for coming.